Right now, as you are watching this video, there is a quiet financial event building underneath the surface of the global economy. And almost nobody in your circle is talking about it. Not your friends, not your family. Not the news anchors reading their scripts on TV, but the people who understand what is coming. They are not panicking. They are positioning. And by the end of this video, you will understand exactly what they know, and more importantly, what you should do about it. If you are interested in money, finance, or changing your financial future, like this video and subscribe right now, because what you are about to learn can change the way you see money forever. Let me start with a simple question. What if I told you that one of the most powerful financial moves of the next few years has nothing to do with crypto, stocks, or real estate? What if I told you it involves something that has been sitting quietly in the background for decades, something that most people dismiss as old-fashioned, something that ordinary people have historically used to protect their wealth when everything else was falling apart? And what if I told you that, right now, in this exact moment in history, this thing is sitting at the edge of something massive, and most people are going to miss it completely? That thing is silver. And before you think, oh, silver, that's for old people and preppers, I need you to stay with me. Because what I'm about to share with you is not a fantasy or hype. It is grounded in real patterns, real history, and real economic forces that are already in motion. This is not about getting rich overnight. This is about understanding something deeper, something that could genuinely protect your financial future while everyone else is sleeping. Let me tell you about a man named Daniel. Daniel is 32 years old. He works a regular job at a logistics company, makes a decent salary, pays his rent, saves a little each month, and thinks he is doing okay. He is not rich, but he is not broke either. He is right in the middle, the place where most of us live. And like most people in the middle, Daniel had almost no idea that the value of his savings was being quietly eaten away every single month. Not by a thief, not by a bad investment, but by something invisible, something built into the system itself. And when Daniel finally understood what was happening to his money, it changed everything for him. I will come back to Daniel's story in a moment, because what he discovered next is the part most people never find out. But first, you need to understand something that the financial world tries to make complicated, but is actually very simple. Money, as we know it today, is not what it used to be. 100 years ago, if you had a dollar, that dollar was backed by something real, something physical. Gold, silver, things you could hold in your hand. But slowly, over decades, that changed. Governments around the world moved away from physical backing and started printing money based on trust. Just pure trust. The belief that the piece of paper in your wallet is worth something. And for a long time, that worked reasonably well. But here's the uncomfortable truth. When governments print too much money, when debt piles up to levels that seem impossible, when inflation starts eating into everything you earn and save, the trust starts to crack. And when trust cracks, people throughout history have always run to the same things, gold and silver. Now here is where it gets really interesting. And this is the part that most financial videos never talk about. Gold gets all the attention. Gold is glamorous. Gold is what kings and banks and billionaires hoard. But silver? Silver is the underdog. Silver is the quiet asset that has been sitting in the background, undervalued, ignored, almost forgotten. And that is exactly what makes it so interesting right now. Because in financial markets, when something is ignored long enough, when it is undervalued long enough, when the gap between what it is worth and what it is priced at grows wide enough, eventually something gives. Eventually the coil springs. And when silver springs, history shows it does not move gently. It moves fast, and it moves hard. Let me give you a real-life example to make this feel concrete. Imagine you find out that a shop in your neighborhood has been selling a product for $5 that costs $20 everywhere else. You would buy as much as you could, right? You would tell your friends. And as more and more people realize the deal, the shop owner raises the price, fast. That is basically what silver analysts and serious investors believe is happening right now in slow motion with the silver market. The price has been suppressed, overlooked, and undervalued for years, and the setup for a significant move is quietly coming together. But why now? Why is silver different today than it was 5 years ago or 10 years ago? This is where I need to explain something, and I promise to keep it simple. Silver is unique in one very important way that gold is not. Silver is not just a store of value. It is not just something pretty you wear around your neck or store in a vault. Silver is an industrial metal. It is used in solar panels, electric vehicles, smartphones, medical equipment, semiconductors, and defense technology. In other words, the world literally needs silver to build the future. And as the global push for clean energy and technology accelerates, as countries race to build more solar farms, manufacture more electric vehicles, and develop more advanced electronics, the demand for silver is going up, not a little, significantly. And here is where the story gets tense. Because while demand is rising, Supply is not keeping up. Silver mining is expensive, slow, and complicated. You cannot just decide to dig more silver out of the ground overnight. It takes years to develop a mine. And right now, the amount of silver being pulled out of the earth is not enough to meet the demand that experts project is coming. That mismatch, rising demand, shrinking supply, is what market analysts call a supply squeeze. And historically, supply squeezes in precious metals end in price explosions. I will explain exactly how dramatic those explosions can be in a moment. But first, let me come back to Daniel. When Daniel started doing his research, not because he was rich or sophisticated, but because he was genuinely worried about his financial future, he stumbled upon something called the gold to silver ratio. This is a number that tells you how many ounces of silver it takes to buy 1 ounce of gold. Historically, that ratio has averaged somewhere around 15 to 16. In nature, gold and silver are actually found in the earth at roughly the same ratio. But today, that ratio has been sitting at levels far, far above that historical average for years. What that means, in simple terms, is that silver is historically cheap compared to gold right now. And every single time in history that this ratio has stretched to extreme levels, it has eventually corrected, and silver has outperformed gold in the move back toward balance. Daniel was not a financial expert. He was just a regular guy who read and asked questions. But what he found changed how he thought about his money forever. Now let me be real with you for a second, because this video is not about telling you that silver is a guaranteed lottery ticket. Nothing in finance is guaranteed. Anyone who tells you otherwise is either lying or selling something. What I am talking about is a risk-reward setup, a situation where the evidence, the history, the economics, and the timing all point in one direction, and where the downside of being wrong is much smaller than the upside of being right. Think about it this way. If you are a student, a salary worker, or someone just trying to build some financial stability, you are probably not getting much help from a savings account right now. Interest rates on savings accounts, after inflation, often leave you with less purchasing power than when you started. The system is not designed to make average people wealthy. It is designed to keep them comfortable enough to keep working. And that is not a conspiracy theory. That is just economics. The people who understand this find ways to work around it, and this is where most people fail without even realizing it. They keep doing the same thing, working, saving in cash, trusting that the system will reward their patience, while quietly, year after year, the value of what they saved buys a little less. A coffee that cost $2 now costs $5. A grocery run that cost $80 now costs $120. Rent that was affordable a few years ago is now crushing. This is what inflation does. It is a slow, invisible tax on your savings. The people who protect themselves from inflation are the ones who put at least some of their savings into things that hold real value, things the government cannot print more of, things like silver. Let me walk you through some real history, because this is where curiosity turns into conviction. In 1970, silver was priced at around $1.50 per ounce. By 1980, it had exploded to nearly $50 per ounce in a single decade. That is a gain of over 3,000% for people who were holding silver when most others were not paying attention. Now, was that a one-time event? No. In 2008, during the global financial crisis, the same one that wiped out millions of people's savings and retirement accounts, silver initially dropped. But then, between 2008 and 2011, it went from around $8 an ounce to nearly $50 an ounce again. In 3 years, the people who were positioned before the crisis did not just survive. They grew their wealth while the world around them was collapsing. And nobody talks about this part. The people who benefited from those silver moves were not hedge fund managers or Wall Street insiders. They were ordinary people, teachers, mechanics, nurses, small business owners, who understood what was happening and made a decision. They did not go all in. They did not gamble their entire life savings. They simply allocated a portion of their money into something real, something physical, something that had served as a store of value for thousands of years. And when the market corrected, they were on the right side. Now here's the question you might be thinking. If silver is so powerful, why is it not already at some crazy high price? Why is it still sitting at relatively moderate levels? Great question. And the answer to this is actually what makes this moment so interesting. Silver markets, like almost all commodity markets, can be manipulated in the short term by large financial institutions who trade paper contracts, promises of silver that may not even have physical silver behind them. These are called futures contracts, and for decades, critics and analysts have argued that the paper market for silver has been used to artificially keep the price lower than true supply and demand would dictate. In 2020, a major bank paid over $900 million in fines related to precious metals market manipulation. That is not a rumor. That is a legal settlement. And it tells you that the silver market, like many financial markets, does not always reflect pure reality. But here's what market manipulation cannot do forever. It cannot fight physics. It cannot fight real-world demand. You cannot keep price suppressed indefinitely when industrial buyers need physical silver to build solar panels and electric vehicles and semiconductors. At some point, the physical reality of supply and demand breaks through the paper fantasy. And when that happens, when real buyers need real silver and the supply is not there, prices adjust, quickly, dramatically. But what happened next in the current story is still unfolding. And this is the part I want you to pay attention to. We are living through something that has never quite happened before in human history at this scale. Multiple massive forces are converging at the same time. First, you have the global energy transition. Solar panels alone require enormous amounts of silver, and every major government in the world has committed to dramatically expanding solar capacity over the next decade. Second, you have electric vehicles, which also require silver for their electrical systems and batteries. Third, you have a global economy where central banks, the institutions that control money supply, have printed historic amounts of currency over the last several years. More money chasing the same amount of goods is the textbook definition of inflation. And when inflation runs hot, people flee to real assets. Fourth, you have geopolitical instability. Tensions between major world powers are creating uncertainty that historically drives investment into safe haven assets. And silver, like gold, has always been a safe haven asset. Now take all four of those forces, stack them on top of each other. And then remember that silver is already in a position where the gold to silver ratio is historically stretched. Supply is constrained, and major institutional players are beginning to take notice. This is where everything changes. Let me bring in another real person to make this land emotionally. Her name is Priya. She's a 28-year-old nurse. She works hard, takes extra shifts when she can, and has been trying for years to get ahead financially. But no matter how much she earns, inflation and rising living costs keep swallowing what she saves. She feels like she is running on a treadmill that keeps speeding up. Sound familiar? Priya started learning about silver not because she was chasing riches, but because she was scared. She was scared that the future she was working toward was being quietly stolen from her, not by a person, but by a system. And what she found when she started learning gave her something she had not felt in a long time. Control. Not control over the entire economy, but control over her small piece of it. Because she understood that she could convert at least some of her savings into something real, something the government could not devalue overnight. And that understanding changed her relationship with money permanently. And I want you to feel what Priya felt. Because this is not about silver as a magic ticket. It is about financial literacy. It is about understanding the game well enough to play it wisely. And the uncomfortable truth is that most people are playing without knowing the rules. Here is something that will shock you. The average American, according to surveys, holds less than $400 in accessible savings. In Pakistan, India, across Southeast Asia, across Africa, the numbers are even more striking. Millions of people who work incredibly hard every single day have almost no financial cushion. And this is not because they are lazy or careless. It is because nobody ever taught them how money actually works. Nobody explained inflation to them in a way that made sense. Nobody told them that sitting on cash is itself a financial decision, and often not a good one. And nobody told them about assets like silver that ordinary people can access without needing to be wealthy first. You do not need to be rich to buy silver. A single ounce of silver costs less than a nice dinner out. You can start with 1 ounce. You can buy a little every month the same way people buy coffee every morning. And over time, you build a position. This is what average people in financially sophisticated cultures have been doing quietly for generations. In India, families have stored wealth in silver jewelry for centuries. And not just for beauty, but as a practical financial hedge. In China, silver accumulation among ordinary households has been rising. In parts of the Middle East, physical precious metals have always been considered a standard part of financial planning. This wisdom did not come from financial advisors and glass towers. It came from generations of people who understood that paper can burn, but silver endures. Now I want to talk about what could happen next, and I want to be honest about both sides. Nobody can predict exactly when silver will make its big move. Anyone who tells you it will happen next month or next year is speculating. What analysts can do is look at the conditions, the patterns, and the fundamentals. And right now, most serious precious metals analysts agree that the conditions for a significant silver rally are among the strongest they have ever seen. The industrial demand story is real and growing. The monetary demand story, people protecting themselves against inflation and currency risk, is real and growing. The supply constraint story is real. The historical undervaluation compared to gold is real, and the geopolitical instability story that drives safe haven buying is very, very real. Could silver take longer than expected to move? Yes. Could short-term volatility scare people out of their positions before the big move happens? Absolutely. That is actually one of the most common ways ordinary people lose in any market. They hold for a year, nothing dramatic happens. They get impatient, they sell, and then 6 months later, the thing moves 50%. Patience is not just a virtue in life. In investing, patience is a financial weapon. The people who get the reward are usually the ones who are willing to hold through the quiet periods without panicking. And here's the deeper truth about all of this, the one that goes beyond silver, beyond gold, beyond any single asset. The game of building wealth is not complicated, but it is counterintuitive. It requires you to think differently from the crowd, because the crowd usually buys when things are already expensive and sells when things get scary. That is human nature. But the people who build real financial security over time do the opposite. They pay attention. Before something becomes obvious, they position early, they hold patiently, and they do not let short-term noise shake them out of long-term conviction. Silver is interesting right now precisely because it has not moved dramatically yet, because it is still undervalued, because most people are not talking about it. If it had already tripled in price and was on the front page of every financial newspaper, the opportunity would look very different. Most people never realize this part, and it costs them dearly. The best opportunities in finance almost always feel uncertain at the time. They feel risky, they feel too early. And that discomfort, that uncertainty, that feeling of, am I sure about this? That is actually the price of admission. That is what you pay for having the chance to be on the right side of a major move. Because if it felt completely safe and obvious, everyone would already be doing it, and the price would reflect that. Let me come back to Daniel one final time. Daniel did not become a millionaire by discovering silver. I want to be clear about that. He did not quit his job. He did not become some guru. He just made a decision. He started converting a small portion of his monthly savings, not his emergency fund, not money he could not afford to lose, but a consistent small amount, into physical silver. He bought it in small quantities over time, a strategy sometimes called dollar cost averaging. When the price was higher, he bought a little less. When it dipped, he bought a little more. And over time, he built a position, a real physical, tangible position that sat outside the banking system, outside the reach of inflation, outside the reach of any single government's decision to print more money. More importantly, Daniel changed how he saw money. He stopped seeing his salary as the finish line. He started seeing it as raw material, something to be intelligently deployed, not just spent or saved in a bank. He started understanding that wealth is not about how much you earn. It is about how much of what you earn you can protect and grow over time. And that shift in thinking, that quiet revolution in his head, was worth more than any single asset he ever bought. And here's the real question this video is asking you. Not, should you buy silver? Not, is silver going to the moon? The real question is, what is your financial plan for protecting yourself against a world where inflation is persistent, where currency risks are real, where the cost of everything keeps rising while the value of sitting in cash quietly falls? What is your strategy? Because hoping things work out is not a strategy. Trusting that the system will take care of you is not a strategy. Working harder at a job that pays you in currency that buys less every year, that is not moving forward. That is running in place on a treadmill that is slowly speeding up. Silver may not be the only answer. For some people, it will not even be the main answer. But understanding silver, understanding why it exists as an asset, why it has endured for thousands of years, why it is uniquely positioned right now at this specific moment in history, that understanding is part of financial literacy that most people simply never get. And financial literacy is the single greatest gap between the people who get ahead and the people who do not. The sad reality is that the financial system was not built to teach ordinary people how to protect themselves. It was built to benefit the people at the top. The banks profit when you keep your money in savings accounts with negligible interest. The brokers profit when you trade frantically instead of investing patiently. The governments profit when inflation quietly reduces the real value of their debts, including the debt they owe you in the form of the currency you earn and save. Understanding this does not make you a conspiracy theorist. It makes you literate, and literacy is power. So here is where the journey we have been on today comes full circle. You started this video perhaps not thinking much about silver. Maybe you had a vague idea it was valuable. Maybe you never thought about it at all. But now you understand something different. You understand that silver is not just a metal. It is a form of financial protection that has served ordinary people for thousands of years. You understand that, right now, a unique combination of industrial demand, monetary pressure, supply constraints, and historical undervaluation has created a setup that serious analysts believe could produce a significant move. You understand that the ordinary people who benefit from financial opportunities like this are not the smartest, the richest, or the luckiest. They are simply the ones who paid attention before it was obvious, the ones who decided to learn instead of ignore, the ones who took small, consistent action instead of waiting for a perfect moment that never comes. And you understand, most importantly, that your financial future is not determined by luck or by the economy or by the government. It is determined by you, by the decisions you make, by the knowledge you choose to acquire, by the actions you take or fail to take right now when it matters, before the world figures it out. Daniel figured it out. Priya figured it out. Not because they were exceptional, because they were willing to look, because they were willing to learn, because they were willing to act, imperfectly, impatiently with uncertainty, before they had all the answers. The question is not whether silver is about to do something massive. The question is, are you going to be ready when it does? Or are you going to be like the majority of people who hear about this years from now, when the price has already moved, when the opportunity has already passed, and say, I knew about that, I just didn't act. Do not be that person. You are smarter than that. You watched this entire video, which already puts you in a different category from most people around you. Now take that curiosity, that attention, that hunger for understanding, and do something with it. Read more, research more. Start small if you have to. 1 ounce of silver, 1 decision, 1 step away from sleepwalking through your financial life and towards something more intentional, more protected, more conscious. Because the world is changing fast. The economy is under pressure in ways most people do not yet fully see. And the people who are going to come out of the next decade in a strong financial position are not going to be the ones who earn the most. They are going to be the ones who understood the most, the ones who protected what they earned, the ones who thought ahead instead of reacting after the fact. That is what this video has been about. Not silver as a magic answer. Silver as a window into understanding how wealth actually works, how real assets protect people, how ordinary individuals throughout history have shielded themselves from financial storms that destroyed the unprepared. The storm may not be here yet, but the clouds are forming, and you now know something that most people around you do not. What you do with that knowledge is up to you. If you learned something new today, make sure to subscribe to Money Insights and like this video. More powerful financial truths are coming next.